Give me $9, Claire, or take off that apron and get out of my restaurant. The words cut through Bellavita's packed Friday night dining room so sharply that even the piano player missed a note. Claire Bennett stood beside the register with one hand gripping the edge of the marble counter, her cheeks burning as 20 strangers turned to stare. At 31, Claire was a full-figured blonde with soft blue eyes, a quick memory for regular customers, and the kind of kindness that made her slip extra bread into takeout bags for elderly guests who counted every dollar. None of that mattered to Vanessa Cole, the restaurant manager in the fitted red dress now pointing a manicured finger at Claire, as if she had caught her stealing hundreds instead of questioning a $9 shortage. I didn't take anything, Claire said quietly. Her white blouse was already wrinkled from 10 hours of carrying trays, and her feet ached inside cheap black shoes she had repaired twice rather than replace. She needed this job. Her rent was due Monday, her checking account held $43, and 3 months earlier, her fiancé had walked away after telling her she should be grateful any man had wanted a woman her size in the first place. Claire had survived that humiliation without begging him to stay. She refused to beg Vanessa now. The register was balanced before my break, she said. Vanessa laughed loudly enough for the nearest tables to hear. Of course it was. And I suppose $9 just grew legs? A few employees lowered their eyes. Nobody defended Claire. Nobody except the man sitting alone in the darkest corner booth. Adrian Moretti had arrived 40 minutes earlier without a reservation, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Claire earned in 6 months. Most customers saw an unusually handsome man in his mid-30s with black hair, a controlled expression, and a glass of bourbon he had barely touched. Vanessa knew better. So did the 2 security men waiting near the entrance. Adrian Moretti was the Mafia Boss whose name could silence arguments across half the city. Wealthy, feared, and almost impossible to read, Adrian had built his power by trusting numbers instead of people. After betrayal inside his own family taught him that affection could become leverage. He rarely interfered in strangers' problems. Tonight, however, he had been watching Claire long before Vanessa began shouting. He had seen Claire kneel beside an embarrassed little boy after the child spilled soda on himself. He had watched her quietly replace an elderly couple's incorrect order without blaming the exhausted teenage busboy who caused the mistake. And 15 minutes earlier, Adrian had noticed something Vanessa apparently hadn't. Claire had placed a $10 bill from her own pocket into the tip jar after a customer left without tipping the new server she was training. "Empty your pockets," Vanessa demanded. Claire's face changed. Not from guilt, from disbelief. "You can check the register, you can check the cameras, but you are not going to search me in front of customers." Vanessa stepped closer. "Then you're fired." Claire swallowed hard, untied her black apron, and placed it carefully on the counter. Her fingers trembled, but her voice did not. "If protecting my dignity costs me this job, then keep the job." For the first time that evening, Adrian's expression shifted. Vanessa snatched the apron and tossed it beside the register. "Good luck finding another restaurant that wants someone who looks like you representing them." The room went painfully still. Claire looked down for 1 second, the old wound landing exactly where Vanessa intended. Then she lifted her chin. She turned toward the employee hallway before anyone could see her eyes fill. That was when Adrian Moretti rose from his booth. No shouting, no threat, just the scrape of one chair against polished wood. Vanessa went pale. Adrian walked toward the register, stopped beside Claire, and looked directly at the security monitors mounted above the bar. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. Then Vanessa forced a laugh that sounded far too thin for the room. "Mr. Moretti, this is an internal employee matter." Adrian turned his head slowly, and whatever she saw in his face erased the smile from hers. "Then handle it like one," he said. "Play the footage." Claire remained beside him, still clutching the strap of her worn purse, confused by the sudden change in the manager who had been humiliating her only moments earlier. Vanessa had never hesitated to bark orders at cooks, servers, or delivery drivers, yet now her fingers shook as she reached for the security keyboard. Adrian noticed. Claire noticed too. The monitor switched to a grainy overhead view of the register marked 8:17 p.m. Claire appeared on screen carrying 2 dinner plates toward table 12. She was nowhere near the cash drawer. Seconds later, a young server named Tyler rushed behind the counter, opened the register, made change for a $20 bill, then hurried away after accidentally placing a 10 in the slot meant for ones. "There," Claire whispered. Vanessa crossed her arms. "That proves nothing. Claire was assigned to the register tonight. Shortages are her responsibility." Adrian stepped closer to the counter. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. "You accused her of stealing." "I said the drawer was short." "You ordered her to empty her pockets in front of a dining room full of people." Vanessa's face tightened. "I run this restaurant." Adrian glanced around the room. Several employees immediately looked away. Poorly. The single word landed harder than shouting could have. Claire stared at him. She expected him to demand an apology or threaten Vanessa. Instead, Adrian did something stranger. He turned to Claire. "Were you responsible for training him?" She looked toward Tyler, who stood frozen near the kitchen doors, 17 years old, and already terrified he would lose his first job. Claire could have saved herself by blaming him. Everyone in the room knew it. "Yes," she said, "but he made an honest mistake. It was busy, and I should have checked the drawer before my break." Adrian studied her face. "You're taking responsibility for someone who just proved you weren't responsible." Claire's eyes met his. There's a difference between responsibility and guilt. Something in Adrian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. He had spent years around men who traded loyalty for survival before the danger even reached the door. Yet this woman, after being insulted and fired, was still protecting a frightened teenager who had nothing to offer her. Vanessa interrupted. "Fine. Maybe she didn't steal it, but she already quit." Claire's cheeks flushed. "You fired me." "Same difference." Adrian reached inside his jacket. Vanessa visibly flinched, but he merely removed a black business card and placed it on the counter. "Call my office tomorrow morning." Vanessa blinked. "Why?" "Because the private dining contract your restaurant has been negotiating with Moretti Holdings for the next 12 months is canceled." The blood drained from her face. The contract was worth far more than Claire could imagine. You can't cancel a 6-figure agreement over a waitress. Adrian's gaze hardened. "I just did." Claire looked at him, stunned. "Mr. Moretti, you don't have to do that for me." He turned toward her again, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I didn't do it because you need rescuing. I did it because I don't do business with people who confuse power with permission to humiliate someone." Claire had spent months hearing that she should accept whatever treatment people gave her because she needed the paycheck, heck, because she wasn't glamorous enough, polished enough, thin enough, connected enough. Yet the most intimidating man in the room was the first person who had defended her without asking her to become smaller first. She looked away before the emotion reached her face. "Thank you," she whispered. Adrian noticed her hands were still trembling. Without touching her, he moved between Claire and the staring customers, giving her a shield of privacy as she slipped on. Claire had walked nearly half a block when the restaurant door opened behind her. Claire. She stopped beneath the yellow glow of a street lamp, but did not turn immediately. Adrian Moretti's voice was unmistakable, low, controlled, the kind that made crowded rooms quiet without effort. When she finally faced him, he was standing several feet away, deliberately giving her space. The cold night air moved through his dark hair, and his expensive suit looked strangely out of place beside the alley dumpsters and delivery entrance where employees took their breaks. If Vanessa sent you to convince me to come back, Claire said, don't bother. Adrian's mouth almost curved. Vanessa is currently trying to convince me not to destroy her contract. Claire folded her arms against the cold. Then why are you out here? Adrian looked at her for a moment before answering. Because you left before I could ask you something. He held up his phone. On the screen was a still image from Bella Vita's security footage. Vanessa stood behind the register, one hand inside the open drawer. Claire frowned. What am I looking at? 7 minutes before she accused you, Vanessa opened your register without entering a manager override. Claire's confusion sharpened. That's impossible. Only supervisors have the code. Exactly. Adrian enlarged the image. Vanessa's other hand appeared to be holding something small beside the register. Claire's expression changed. She was removing money. Adrian watched her carefully. That's what it looks like. Claire shook her head. Why would she steal $9 just to fire me? Adrian's eyes hardened. That's the question. Before Claire could answer, the restaurant door flew open again. Vanessa stepped onto the sidewalk in her red dress without a coat, anger overcoming whatever fear she had shown inside. Claire, you need to come back in. Claire straightened. You fired me. I'm correcting a misunderstanding. No, Adrian said. Vanessa stopped. Claire glanced between them. Adrian remained calm, but something about his stillness made Vanessa's face tighten. Mr. Moretti, she said, lowering her voice, this has nothing to do with you. You made it my business when you attempted to frame an employee during a meeting involving my company. Vanessa's eyes flicked toward Claire. For 1 second, there was no embarrassment in them. There was calculation. Frame her? Vanessa scoffed. You don't know, Claire. Neither do you, Claire replied before Adrian could. Vanessa stared at her, clearly unaccustomed to hearing resistance. I know enough. I know you've been asking questions about the private dining invoices. Claire's face went still. Adrian noticed instantly. What invoices? Vanessa realized she had said too much. Nothing. Adrian turned to Claire. What invoices? Claire hesitated. She had no reason to trust a mafia boss she had met less than an hour ago, even one who had defended her. But the look in his eyes wasn't demanding. It was waiting, giving her the choice. 3 weeks ago, she said slowly, I was closing the restaurant and found duplicate catering receipts in the printer tray. Same dates, same clients, different totals. I thought it was an accounting error. Adrian's attention sharpened. How different? Sometimes $2,000, sometimes $5,000. Vanessa stepped forward. She doesn't understand our billing system. Claire ignored her. Yesterday, I found an invoice with Moretti Holdings listed as the client. Your company was charged for 180 guests. Adrian's expression darkened. My reservation was for 90. I know. Claire reached into her purse and removed a folded piece of paper. That's why I made a copy. Vanessa lunged for it. Adrian moved before Claire could react, stepping directly between them. He never touched Vanessa. He simply blocked her path, broad shoulders turning into an immovable wall. Don't, he said. Vanessa froze. Claire stared at the paper in her hand, suddenly understanding. The missing $9 had never been about $9. Vanessa needed her gone before Claire discovered where the rest of the money was going. Adrian extended his hand but stopped short of taking the document. May I? Claire looked at him, then placed the paper into his palm. He read the numbers once, his jaw tightened. This isn't petty theft. Vanessa backed toward the restaurant door. You're making a mistake. Adrian looked up. Then explain why my company has been overbilled by nearly $40,000 in 6 months. Claire's breath caught. Vanessa's face drained of color. Then Adrian's phone vibrated. His security chief had sent another frame from the restaurant cameras. Adrian opened it and went completely still. The image showed Vanessa standing beside a man near the rear office earlier that evening. Claire recognized him immediately. That's Daniel Reeves, she whispered. The darkness lasted less than 2 seconds before Bellavita's emergency lights flickered on, flooding the dining room in a dim red glow. Customers began murmuring, chairs scraped across the floor, and somewhere near the kitchen, a woman screamed. Adrian immediately stepped in front of Claire, one arm extended behind him without touching her, creating a barrier between her and the darkened doorway. "Stay here." Claire looked through the glass and saw frightened servers gathering near the kitchen. "My coworkers are still inside. My security team is coming. They don't know the building." Adrian turned toward her. Even under the emergency lights, his expression was controlled, but Claire saw something underneath it, fear, not for himself, but for her. "Claire, there's a service exit behind the wine storage room," she said. "If Vanessa went to the office, I know how to reach it without crossing the dining room." Adrian stared at her for one beat, then made a decision. "You stay behind me. If I tell you to move, you move." Claire almost smiled despite everything. "You're very used to giving orders." Occupational hazard. It was the closest thing to humor she had heard from him. The restaurant that had been glowing with warm chandeliers minutes earlier now looked unfamiliar beneath pulsing emergency lights. Adrian kept himself between Claire and every blind corner as she guided him past the kitchen, through a narrow storage corridor, and toward Vanessa's office. When they reached the door, Claire heard frantic typing inside. Adrian raised one finger to his lips. Then came Vanessa's voice. "Delete everything before Moretti gets the server." Claire's eyes widened. A man answered. "Daniel Reeves. The invoices are already backed up. We need the ledger." Claire's face changed. Adrian noticed immediately. "What?" he whispered. "There's a paper ledger," she said. "Vanessa keeps it behind the liquor inventory binder. I saw her writing in it last week." Adrian's gaze sharpened. "You never mentioned that." "Because I thought it was supplier accounting." Before he could respond, the office door opened. Vanessa stepped out carrying a black folder and stopped cold when she saw them. Daniel appeared behind her. He was older than Adrian, silver-haired and dressed like a businessman who expected doors to open before he reached them. "Moretti," Daniel said with an almost amused smile. "Still letting strangers lead you into traps?" Adrian's body went still. Claire could feel the temperature of the moment change. "Give me the folder," Adrian said. Daniel laughed softly. "You think this is about restaurant invoices?" Vanessa clutched the ledger tighter. "Daniel, stop!" But Daniel was already enjoying himself. "Ask your waitress whose signature approved every inflated payment." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Daniel reached into his jacket and slowly removed a folded document, careful to keep both hands visible. He tossed it onto a nearby service cart. Adrian opened it. Claire watched his face become colder with every line. At the bottom of the page was an authorization signature. "Luca Moretti," Claire read quietly. Adrian said nothing. Luca was not merely an executive at Moretti Holdings. He was Adrian's cousin, the man who had managed company finances since Adrian's father died, one of the few people Adrian still trusted enough to sit at his family table. Daniel smiled. "Your enemy wasn't stealing from you, Adrian. Your family was." Claire looked at Adrian and saw the wound before he could hide it. For a man feared across the city, betrayal was the one weapon that still reached somewhere armor couldn't protect. Vanessa suddenly pushed past Daniel and tried to run toward the rear exit. Claire reacted before Adrian could, stepping sideways and pulling a heavy supply cart into the narrow passage. Vanessa stopped short. "Move." "No." Claire's voice trembled, but she stayed where she was. "You accused me of stealing $9 because you thought embarrassment would make me disappear." Vanessa's face twisted. "You're a waitress. Nobody is going to believe you over people like us." The old Claire might have looked down. This time, she didn't. "Then it's lucky I stopped needing your permission to tell the truth." Adrian looked at her, and something in his expression softened despite the danger surrounding them. Daniel suddenly laughed. What truth? We cut the cameras. The server is being wiped right now. Claire reached into her purse. Not everything was on your server. She pulled out her phone. Vanessa went pale. 3 weeks earlier, after finding the duplicate invoices, Claire had photographed every page because she was afraid the originals would vanish. She had saved them to an online folder and scheduled them to send to herself if she ever lost access to her work account. Adrian stared at her. You kept copies? I've been blamed for things before, Claire said. I learned to keep proof. Adrian watched the security clip a second time, then locked his phone and looked at Daniel with a calm that frightened Claire more than anger would have. Where is Luca? Daniel's smile faded. You're too late. For what? At midnight, the final ownership transfer clears. By morning, 3 of your holding companies belong to be spent years trying to keep out of this city. Adrian glanced at his watch, 11:21 p.m. 39 minutes. Vanessa tightened her grip on the black ledger while Daniel backed toward the office. Destroy Claire's copies, he said, and maybe you still have time to negotiate. Adrian didn't move. You built this around her? She was supposed to be easy, Vanessa snapped, looking at Claire. No money, no connections, no one important waiting at home. I thought if I embarrassed her badly enough, she'd disappear. Claire's face went pale, but she remained beside Adrian instead of retreating behind him. Vanessa gave a bitter laugh. Look at her, Adrian. You're risking millions for a waitress you met tonight. Adrian turned his head slightly toward Claire. No. His voice was quiet. I'm risking money to stop people who thought someone's paycheck determined whether the truth mattered. Claire felt something inside her shift. All evening, people had spoken about her as though she were an inconvenience, the sigh of a body in an apron, an employee desperate enough to tolerate anything. Adrian was the first man with real power who had looked at her and still left the choice in her hands. His security team entered through the service corridor behind them, led by Marcus Hale, Adrian's longtime head of security. Off-site recordings are secured, Marcus said, and Luca's at the Moretti Foundation Gala downtown. The board vote starts in 25 minutes. Adrian held out his hand toward Claire's phone but stopped before touching it. Those photographs are yours. If you give them to me, this becomes bigger than Vanessa losing her job. There'll be investigators, lawyers, people asking questions. I can protect you, but I won't decide for you. Claire stared at the screen containing weeks of invoices. Her old instinct told her to stay quiet. Quiet women kept jobs. Quiet women avoided attention. Quiet women survived. Then she remembered Vanessa ordering her to empty her pockets before strangers and telling her nobody would want someone who looked like her representing them. Claire unlocked the phone. Send everything. Adrian's eyes held hers for 1 second. Respect replaced whatever protective concern had been there before. Marcus. Within minutes, the records were copied, time-stamped, and transmitted to Adrian's legal team. Daniel's confidence vanished. Vanessa suddenly shoved the ledger toward a metal trash bin and reached for a lighter from the office counter. Claire moved first. She grabbed the ledger before Vanessa could drop it, pulling it against her chest. Vanessa seized Claire's wrist. Adrian was beside them instantly. Take your hand off her. He didn't shout. Vanessa released Claire as though the words themselves had burned. Adrian positioned himself between them, but Claire stepped around his shoulder. No, she said softly. Adrian looked at her. I need to say this. Claire faced Vanessa. $9. That's what you thought my dignity was worth. You thought because I needed this job I would let you accuse me, shame me, and walk away quietly. Vanessa looked toward the employees gathering at the end of the hallway. Claire, you didn't fire me because I stole, Claire continued. You fired me because I noticed what you were doing. She held up the ledger, and I'm done being embarrassed for someone else's dishonesty. For the first time, several employees stepped toward Claire rather than away from Vanessa. Tyler appeared among them, eyes wet with guilt. She protected me, he said. She knew I made the register mistake, and she still wouldn't let Vanessa blame me. Another server spoke up. Then another. Stories surfaced, missing tips, altered hours, suspicious invoices. Vanessa's authority collapsed in real time. Adrian's phone rang. Luca, the hallway fell silent as Adrian answered on speaker. Cousin, Luca said smoothly, I heard there's been some confusion. Adrian's eyes remained on Claire. No confusion. Then bring me the waitress and the ledger before midnight, and we can fix this privately. Claire saw Adrian's jaw tighten. Luca continued, choose carefully. That board is waiting for your signature. Walk away tonight and you could lose everything your father built. Adrian looked at the clock above the kitchen door. 11:38. Then he looked at Claire, standing in a stained white blouse with a black ledger against her chest, still trembling but no longer shrinking. Then let them wait, he said. Luca went silent. Adrian took Claire's hand, not pulling, not commanding, simply offering his. She looked down at it, then placed her hand in his. We're going to the gala. Together. Vanessa's face drained of color. Daniel stepped backward. Claire swallowed. What happens when we get there? Adrian opened the service door, cold night air rushing into the hallway. You tell the truth. His gaze hardened. And I make sure everyone powerful enough to bury it is forced to listen. 22 minutes remained before midnight, when Adrian and Claire climbed into the waiting car, unaware that Luca already knew they were coming, and he had one final move prepared to make Claire look guilty in front of the entire Moretti family. At 11:47 p.m., the doors of the Moretti Foundation ballroom opened and every conversation inside died at once. Adrian Moretti entered first in his charcoal suit, his expression colder than the winter night outside. But Claire Bennett walked beside him instead of behind him, still wearing her waitress blouse beneath her coat and carrying the black ledger against her chest. Crystal chandeliers burned above nearly 200 guests. Business executives, attorneys, donors, and members of the Moretti family gathered around a long stage where Luca Moretti stood waiting beside a stack of contracts. His smile appeared the moment he saw Claire. Perfect timing, Luca said. The thief brought the evidence herself. A murmur swept across the ballroom. Claire stopped. Adrian immediately moved half a step closer, close enough for her to feel his presence without being hidden by it. Luca lifted several printed pages. Claire Bennett accessed Bella Vita's private financial records without authorization and attempted to blackmail our partners. We have emails proving it. Claire's stomach dropped as copies were passed among the board members. Her name appeared on every message. For one terrible second, the humiliation from the restaurant returned, the staring faces, the silent judgment, the feeling that people had already decided what she was before she could speak. Adrian looked at her. Claire, she swallowed. Those emails aren't mine. I know. 3 words. No hesitation, no suspicion. The trust in his voice steadied her more than any speech could have. Luca laughed. You know her for less than one night. Adrian's eyes hardened, and in that time, she had 3 opportunities to save herself by blaming someone weaker. She didn't take one of them. I've known you 34 years, Luca, and you just tried to destroy an innocent woman to protect a stolen contract. Luca's smile vanished. Careful, without my vote, you lose control of the companies at midnight. The ballroom clock read 11:53. Adrian stepped toward the stage. Then I lose them. Shock rippled through the room. Lucas stared at him. You'd throw away your father's empire for her? Adrian glanced back at Claire. No, I'd rather lose an empire than become the kind of man who keeps it by sacrificing someone innocent. Claire's eyes filled, but before emotion could overwhelm her, she remembered the phone in her hand. Wait. Everyone turned toward her. Claire walked forward on shaking legs. The fake emails say I photographed the invoices Tuesday night at 10:14. Luca's face changed almost invisibly. Claire unlocked her phone. But my original photographs were uploaded 3 weeks ago. Every file has a timestamp, and every invoice matches the ledger Vanessa tried to destroy tonight. Marcus connected Claire's records to the ballroom screen. One by one, the invoices appeared behind Luca. Altered totals, duplicate charges, payments linked to shell vendors, and finally the off-site Bella Vita footage showing Luca instructing Daniel to fire Claire because she knew too much. The room went silent. "That footage is manipulated," Luca snapped. "Then you won't mind explaining it to the auditors and attorneys already receiving copies," Adrian replied. His legal counsel stepped forward. "The transfer vote is suspended pending investigation." The clock reached 11:58. Luca's final weapon had failed. Claire had not needed Adrian to speak for her. She had brought the truth herself. Adrian had simply made sure the room could not silence her. By sunrise, Vanessa and Daniel had been removed from Bella Vita's management, the fraudulent contracts were frozen, and Claire's name was formally cleared. Adrian refused when the restaurant's new operators offered to give Claire her old job back. Not because he wanted to control her future, but because he asked her a different question. What do you actually want? Nobody had asked her that in years. Claire eventually smiled. To manage a place where nobody gets treated the way I was treated. 6 months later, Bella Vita reopened under new ownership with Claire as general manager. She hired Tyler full-time, created transparent tip policies, and became known not for her size, but for the way employees straightened with confidence when she entered the room. Adrian never tried to change her. He never bought her a new body, a new personality, or a new version of herself. He simply kept showing up, sometimes with coffee after closing, sometimes sitting silently while she balanced invoices, sometimes placing his coat around her shoulders when they walked home through the cold. One evening, beneath the warm lights of the same dining room where she had once been humiliated, Claire caught herself looking into a mirror. For the first time, she did not search for something to apologize for. Adrian appeared behind her, stopping at her side. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," he said softly. "I just like seeing you finally look at yourself the way I do." Claire smiled, took his hand in front of everyone, and this time she did not shrink from being seen. A $9 accusation had been meant to erase her, but it exposed a betrayal, saved an empire, and brought two lonely people into each other's lives. So here's the question. If everyone around you decided someone wasn't worth defending, would you have the courage to stand beside them anyway? If you enjoyed Claire and Adrian's story, subscribe to the channel for more emotional Mafia Boss stories where dignity, loyalty, and unexpected love can change everything.